really excited to have this conversation with you because
Same.
recently I'm very well versed on obviously quantum health. We've spoken a ton about that, circadian biology, grounding. You know, we don't just get energy from food. Mind blown. We get it from so many other ways, which I'm sure you can explain for us. But recently, I hadn't walked this really nice walking track in probably 2 years now. And I decided the other week I was going to go and walk it. And it's a beautiful track. It's all around the beach, really lovely area, the national park in Noosa. And I was really saddened because I saw that they had added 5 AEDs, which are automatic defibrillators for people who go into cardiac arrest suddenly along the walking track. And for me, this made me so sad. And then you have to ask the question, so why is everyone all of a sudden suffering from cardiac arrest whilst they're exercising outside under the sun? And then I started thinking about this and I realized your messages are so powerful because we need to be connected to all of our energy sources all the time, but especially when our body is under so much physical stress. And so I'm sure you can kind of flow into a conversation surrounding our energy sources and how we actually get energy.
100%. So we have evolved, you know, to live outside, just like all the other animals where they're constantly outside, grounded and under the sun. You know, we are the only ones who stay indoors and then all of a sudden decide to go outside for a run or something like that. And we get exposed for only just a short period of time. And of course, we need to remember that the sun is also a stressor to the body. And so when we are exposed to so many different stressors in our daily life and we are not harmonizing that body by grounding and taking the time to take care of ourselves, you know, to take care of our sleep, to take care of our nervous system, you know, to come back to balance, then what's going to happen is that the body just gets totally overwhelmed. And then, you know, if we're exposing ourselves to, you know, midday sun, so for example, you don't even see the sunrise in the morning and you decide to go in the middle of the day to go for your run, it's probably not the best idea because you're getting that strong UV light, which is, you know, of course, it's going to be quite harsh on you, especially if you spend a long period of time outside and you haven't built that resilience towards that. And it's so important that people build that solar callus, as we call it, and, you know, that protection from the sun, first of all, before, you know, thinking about going in midday sun and build a good circadian rhythm, because this is actually going to help our performance and our vitality, our sleep, and every aspect of our life. It's going to have a massive impact. And, you know, as you mentioned, that we don't get energy only from our food, but also from our environment. And the thing is that many people, when they go running, they're also wearing rubber soles. And of course, people should probably not consider going barefoot running from the beginning because, you know, you have to also condition your body into doing that as well. And because there might be some sharp objects or something like this. But the thing is that if you're not doing it somewhere where, if you go for a run on the beach, for example, that's probably like the safest place to go barefoot running. But if you go somewhere like in a forest or something, you might get a thorn in your foot or something like that. You know, it's not probably the most comfortable thing. So it's not about necessarily that one hour that you're going to be exercising, but what are you doing the other 23 hours? You know, are you exposed to the earth? Are you gathering electrons from the earth, you know, grounded barefoot? And are you in the sun? And if you are not doing those things, then of course you're going to have a massive impact on your health and your performance and your vitality. And that's going to have implications also on your cardiovascular fitness as well. And so if our nervous system is dysregulated because of lack of energy in the system, then, you know, our body's not going to be under more stress. And that puts us at greater risks for other conditions.
That's exactly right. So that was a lot of information. Thank you so much for sharing that. You explained it really, really well, actually. So for anyone who's watching or watches this that doesn't really understand circadian biology or quantum health, I feel like we're so used to this terminology now that it kind of becomes second nature. So I really just want to touch on a few things that you said. And then if you could explain that in layman's terms, that would be great. So you mentioned that it's really important to watch the sunrise, especially if you're exercising during the day. So do you want to explain to us why that is?
Yeah. So when we wake up with the sunrise, we are setting the tone for the day. We are telling the body what to do with our hormones. and what to do with our energy levels, and to set our leptin, which is our appetite and our hunger hormone. And we are telling the body how much energy we have available in the system, but we're also telling the body what time of the day to release the hormones. And of course, when we wake up at the sunrise, cortisol naturally rises, which gets us out of that nice waking state. And then afterwards, we get, the healing benefits of the red light therapy in the morning, like we do from red light therapy devices. But of course, nothing beats the sun. If you're not getting the sun, then of course having a red light therapy panel is probably useful. But if you can, it's always a good idea to wake up with the sunrise, because that also tells our body when to release melatonin later on in the day, which is going to help us improve our sleep. And it has this continuous, beautiful cycle like a clock, which is actually allowing our body to wake up at the correct time and go to bed at the correct time, as long as we don't bombard ourselves with artificial blue lighting at night, and then we suppress our melatonin or be exposed to non-native electromagnetic fields. And so all of this is impacting our energy levels and our performance, our recovery and our vitality inside of the body. And so many benefits of like the sunrise is that it conditions the body and tells the eyes and the brain. I believe that, I've never read this somewhere, but I believe that when you are exposed to the morning light, your body prepares you for the midday UV light, and it knows the time of the year and the season based on the morning light. I haven't read this somewhere, but I assume that this could be a thing, because it would make sense from, evolutionary standpoint and a seasonal standpoint, that, the body and the way that the sun is operating is so that it always wants to help us to be in the best, possible state. And so if we are seeing the sunrise in the morning, we are able to condition the eyes and the skin for later on in the day of how to prepare for that midday sun. So then it's not so much of a shock when we are in it. And of course, if we see the sunrise, but then we go inside and then we are exposed to blue light straight away, again, we've ruined that process that we just gained. Of course, it's better that we do the sunrise anyway, but if we immediately expose ourselves to blue lights and we're not protecting ourselves with some blue light blocking glasses or something like this, because I understand many people have to, engage with their electronic devices. It's just so important to know how to protect yourself. Otherwise, you are going to just take away all the benefits that you have gained from the sunrise. And of course, the more time we are outside, the more our body conditions itself to the environment. So it's you feel it in the morning. The sun is not so warm. You see the beauty of the change in the colors, and that change in the colors is changing the way that our hormones are released inside the body, or are turned off or turned on, depending on the time of the day. And then it's just this beautiful cycle, what we call circadian rhythm, circadian health.
Yeah, that was really beautifully said. For anyone who is kind of out of the loop, I'm sure if you follow either of our accounts, you're already quite well versed, but I just want to briefly explain sunlight and sunlight signaling with our body. So for the longest time, we've thought that just because I can look at my phone right now and I can say, okay, it's 4:10 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, my body doesn't actually get that message. So our body actually tells time through the light in our environment. And that is just such a big realization for us. And we have known this for such a long time, but there's been such a disconnect between the general population and the literature. And so we've just gone about our everyday lives, not realizing that it's so important that we actually do get constant light signaling from the sun. And so while we just see illumination coming from the sun, we don't see all these different blends of red, yellow, and we don't necessarily see UV. It truly is this changing blend and makeup of light frequencies all the way from sunrise to sunset. And then turns out each individual light blend of frequencies, that tells our body a certain message. So a specific blend, like let's say sunrise, as Andreas said, that communicates a specific message to our body. And so it's really important that as these light frequencies change, we're exposing our body to them, no sunglasses, because we really need to get that sun straight into our eyes. You might have to do a little bit of tolerance building if you're someone who hasn't exposed their eyes to sunlight quite a lot, if you're thinking and things like that, don't get me wrong. And as Andrea said, like you need to build a solar habit, which we might touch on later. But it's really important that we're getting this light signaling because it regulates things like hormones, which Andreas just spoke about. And so there's so many ways that I can take this, because you've sparked so many just ideas in my mind. But I would like to touch on the fact that so many people live such a busy life. And so if you're someone who perhaps works, let's say 8 to 5 a trade, and then you're waking up at 4 a.m. when it's still dark to go out to the gym because you think that that's going to make you healthier, when maybe it actually isn't, now that we've heard what you've had to say. What's a different strategy for them to still get in exercise? And if they want to work out in the mornings before they start their day, what's a safe way for them to do that?
Okay, so what I would suggest for these kinds of people who are extremely busy is that there is always time in the day. If you have time to watch Netflix, if you have time to scroll social media, there is always time even later on in the day. So there is never an excuse for time. There's always 1 hour in the day that you can devote towards exercise. It's all about priorities. So that's, let's get that clear. So there's always time in the day if something is important to you, extremely important. And so if you really want to get your exercise in, then you are going to devote a certain time of your day which is optimal for you. And of course, you want to do it at the most ideal time of the day so you're not exposed to the artificial lighting. And the issue with going to the gyms is that even if it's the middle of the day where there is sunlight, there is still those artificial blue lights switched on. There is still all the Wi-Fi routers around, and everybody's cell phones that everybody's putting in their bras and in their pants, and so we are exposed to a lot of stress. Unnecessary stress. And when we go to the gym, we are putting our body under more stress. So instead of leaving the gym feeling good, we are leaving the gym feeling absolutely exhausted. And that is not normal. When you leave the gym, you're actually supposed to feel good, and you're not supposed to be trashing yourself from the workouts anyway. You're supposed to be training enough so that you can, train consistently for a lifetime. And so, even if you have to wake up and do it super early, the best thing is to build yourself a home gym and control your light environment, or at least do it outside. I acknowledge that if you live in a city or somewhere, usually they have many LED lights switched on at that time of the night. And that's one thing which I encounter here, even though I'm living in a village. When I wake up in the morning at 5:30 or 6, then all the LED lights are switched on, and I barely want to open the curtains in the morning because I feel like, oh no, my God, before I see the sunrise, I don't want to see those LED lights, And so if you're, I put my red glasses on, I'm just walking around the house a little like this. And so, basically, if you have to wake up that early and because of work and you want to get your workout in early, then at least have, circadian appropriate light bulbs in your house, red light bulbs, because that's going to be probably the best thing, because that kind of mimics the sunrise. Of course, nothing mimics the sun, as we mentioned earlier, but if you want to protect yourself and your eyes and your circadian rhythm, you want to start off with the red light until when it's naturally bluer outside. Then, of course, you want to open the windows because you can let the natural light in when it's time for the light to come. And, of course, we also don't want to raise our cortisol at that time of the day either, at 4 a.m. Like, that's totally not the appropriate time. And so you want to be raising cortisol when it's the right time to raise cortisol, because when we exercise, especially if it's very high intensity, we are going to be raising cortisol. So we need to keep that all in mind when it comes to training and try and regulate our light environment, as we mentioned. So the light inside your home is way easier to control compared to the light in the gym. This is why going to gyms is a big issue. I have absolutely nothing wrong with gyms, nothing wrong with the equipment, nothing wrong with the form of training. It's just that the environments that they have built in is dysfunctional. And this is something that I wanted us to talk about today, is that how can they actually fix their environment so we can have better workouts, so we can actually improve our performance and our recovery. So the thing is that, as we mentioned, that a lot of times gyms are blue lit and they have a Wi-Fi radiation everywhere. And so one simple hack is that they could wire everything and they wouldn't need to have the Wi-Fi on in the gym. They could maybe have it only in one section of the gym, which is not bombarding everybody while they're training.
Yeah, I'd just like to stop for 1 second. Can you please just explain Wi-Fi radiation and then why that's bad for our body?
Okay, so Wi-Fi radiation is something that our body doesn't understand. So it's a microwave type of radiation, just like your microwave emits. So how does your microwave cook food? It heats up the food, like it vibrates the molecules and it generates heat. Well, this is totally abnormal to the human body, and the human resonance is around 7.8 hertz or something like that. And the human heart and the brain works on a similar wavelength. If we're exposed to electromagnetic fields that the body doesn't simply understand, it sends out a stress response. And so we go into a fight and flight state. When we're in a fight and flight state, we use unnecessary energy, and we are just wasting our resources, and we are raising our cortisol and so on. And we are also using beneficial electrons for all of these processes, which would be required for the training or healing or vitality, energy levels, cognition, and so on. So you definitely don't want to be exposed around electromagnetic fields that are non-native. This is why they are called non-native electromagnetic fields, the ones that are harmful to us, because our body just doesn't simply understand. Our biology hasn't evolved to understand these type of frequencies. So our body acts like an antenna. Just like a piece of metal that picks up the lightning, we also pick up the electromagnetic fields from the environment. And so it's extremely important. This is why we talk a lot about grounding, that when we ground, we actually discharge the body. And that's why it's so important that we go and ground every single day, because now in our environment, even if we are not in close proximity, or if we are not using so much technology, we are still bombarded by electromagnetic fields due to the increase in the amount of cell towers around and the amount of technology increase over the years. And so it's even more important now more than ever to get grounded every single day, even if you are living in a city, because it's just important to discharge the body and gain those free electrons from the ground.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you for that. And that's, yeah, that dehydrating factor, right? Because that's why when people heat up meat in a microwave, they often put a cup of water in there, because that's going to counteract that dehydration and rehydrate their meat. And so that's definitely something that we don't want to be happening to our body, especially when we're putting under physical stress inside the skin. And I can see now, like, that's why we need to change, and we need to get rid of that radiation from the environment.
Yep, absolutely. And you know that dehydration is a really, really big issue. You notice that people who spend a lot of time on technology, they are all the time saying that they are constantly thirsty, but no one is asking the question, why are they thirsty? I noticed the same for myself. If I have to do anything on the computer, even for just 1 hour, I feel so thirsty for the rest of the day. And I'm just thinking, this is absolutely insane, that what it's actually doing to my body. But again, what we need to do is try and mitigate, you know, the impact as much as we can, because I acknowledge that it's impossible in this day and age to get rid of technology. Now we've gone so far that we can't go back. So it's important that we are able to take control of our environment and take into consideration and into habit of doing these practices of grounding every day, getting the sunlight, because these things are helping the body to stay hydrated, because it's all about the mitochondria and the mitochondrial function, because that's what creates the water in the body, especially the type of water that we want. And what's happening is, when we are becoming dehydrated from these, from the blue light and the electromagnetic radiation, is that we are causing mitochondrial dysfunction. And this is the reason why we are becoming dehydrated. And we need to remember that our body is basically a big sack of water, and it's being held together by all our muscles, our fascia, and everything together is creating the structure. And we are primarily made out of water, especially the connective tissue. And why there's so many injuries in the fitness and the sports fields now is because now more than ever, people are training indoors, and even athletes, you know, they're training in indoor tracks, indoor environments as well, instead of training outside. And so we are exposed to more blue light, exposed to more non-native EMFs, and people are under-recovering, not sleeping, not taking care of their circadian rhythm. So no wonder we have mitochondrial dysfunction. And because of that, causes dehydration. Dehydrated tissues are more vulnerable because they're less pliable. If they're less pliable, they're more prone to ruptures and tears. And so if we do something explosive, we're definitely, you know, putting ourselves at risk, you know, to hurting ourselves. And we need to remember that our heart is also a muscle. And if that's not pliable and elastic and it's under more stress, what's going to happen there? So something to think about.
That's exactly right. And then when we understand we store most of our mitochondria in our heart and our brains, and for women, the reproductive system, we start to connect chronic migraines and arrhythmias with this mitochondrial dysfunction. And with my nursing background, that's actually something I find extremely interesting. But we you. So you've recommended some changes for gyms that they need to make more of a healthier environment for people to have natural physiology. And so one of them was reducing the non-native media, so the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth speakers, things like this. What's some other ways that they can mitigate the harmful
So
effects?
they should definitely consider, because I also worked when I used to live in Finland. I also worked in an underground gym. Now I wouldn't, knowing all of this. But sometimes you have to do the best that you can with what you've got. So I understand that many gyms in many places are underground gyms, but of course the most ideal thing would be for people to train in gyms which are not underground and actually have windows. And the gyms should open their windows to allow the natural light to come inside, because that is one of the easiest ways to allow full spectrum light to enter the building. And in that way you can save on electricity as well, because you don't even need to have the lights on, especially when it's the middle of the day. I understand in the winter time you probably need lighting, but if you do have to have lighting on, then you should have circadian appropriate lighting. So you can have infrared lights, you can have UVA lights, you can try and mimic the spectrum of light. But of course, as we mentioned, that nothing will ever mimic the sun, but it's just the most important thing to try and get it as close as possible to that, and to try and remove the radiation and to optimize the lighting. So they are using red lights, UV lights, and also they can combine some blue lights in there as well. But I don't think it's necessary, but it's just that it's more for looks, the blue lights, rather than for function.
Yeah. For those gym selfies that everyone takes, they need a little bit of blue light.
I mean, yeah, it looks good, right? It gives you that nice shadow, and it makes your muscles look bigger and you look more shredded. But the problem is that, it's causing you like more harm than benefit. And actually the sun itself is the best lighting for taking photos, especially if you know how to position yourself against the light.
Maybe you'll have to create a mini class on that.
You know what? I actually thought about that, because I thought of making a reel one day, explaining to people how to take, fitness photography and to making good, high quality reels using the sun. And the way that you position yourself to the sun makes all the difference. I can even show you right now. If I turn a little bit sideways, already you can see that now you can see more of the definition in my shoulders and in my arms. But if I'm more straight to the sun, everything gets washed out, because it hides the shadowing. So if you know how to position yourself against the light, you can look better. But that's like an ego thing, it's not that important. But, if I understand that people want to look good in photos and videos.
That's actually probably a nice leeway into one of the questions I had for you. And it's growing up in this century and being exposed to social media and all of the things, I feel like we grow up just hyper fixating on what we look like, and that what we look like is an accurate representation of our health internally and what's happening on the cellular level. It's like the golden trophy in this world is to have big muscles and look really great. But unfortunately, this isn't an accurate representation of cell health. And so although we have these practices like taking certain supplements, exercising indoors all the time, living inside a gym environment, it can give us big muscles and we look really good. It doesn't mean that it's an accurate representation of life longevity. And so we need to do a little bit of retraining when it comes to undoing the programming that's been done by social media and the current health and fitness industry, in realizing that we do really need to focus more on nourishing our cell health, nourishing our quantum health, our circadian health, because these all come together essentially to form our life longevity. And the aim of the game shouldn't be to have big muscles, it should be to have a long, healthy life where you have 2 feet in a heartbeat and you're actively healthy to go and play soccer with your grandchildren.
Yeah, the thing is that most people don't think that way. They don't think so much down the line. They think of, what's happening right here, right now. They want quick fixes. They want to look good right now because they're young, and they're probably thinking, well, and this is why many people resort to steroid usage as well in bodybuilding and fitness, because they want to sacrifice, their longevity for a short-term outlook. And because they just don't appreciate life, and many people just don't have their value system set correctly, that everyone's values needs to be based on taking care of themselves, their family, and supporting each other and uplifting each other and their environment. And if you don't have those in place, then you're definitely going to resort to, just living your life. You only live once. So then you do everything that's, insane, crazy. Many people smoke cigarettes. Many people drink alcohol. They acknowledge that it's bad for them, but they still do it anyway because they realize that, or they think that it's okay because I'm only going to live one time, but then you also don't, you know, appreciate and respect the people around you, because then when you are not in good health, someone else is going to have to take care of you, and you're going to be a burden on someone else. So it's one of the greatest gifts to be in good health and vitality, because then you are able to not only help yourself, but to help others around you. And that's one of my missions in the world. And that's how I got into things as well, that I want to help and, you know, empower and uplift other people around me, you know, and I want to lead by example.
You're doing a really great job with that. I appreciate your work immensely. I love seeing it every day.
Thank you. You too, Kiera.
Thank you. I think there's a beautiful saying, and it's, if you're not good enough for yourself, who are you good enough for?
Yeah.
And I think that's something
exactly
what you were talking about very well.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of lost my train of thought because I don't remember your question exactly. Can you remind me your question? I don't think I answered your question.
Sometimes conversations just flow where they need to be. But I do have another question for you, if you don't mind. I mean, it's the last one on my mental list.
Okay.
But so I want to talk about circadian health and then muscle repair and getting into deep sleep, and then what people can do to optimize this, because I feel like we train hard during the day. People might be going to the gym, working out several times a week, but they fail to realize that we actually need to have restorative sleep and be asleep at a certain time to release things like human growth hormone. And I don't want to answer this myself, but sleep is a very crucial aspect of muscle repair that can really push our progress forward.
Exactly. And that all begins, as we mentioned, in the morning time. So the sunrise is so important to tell our body what to do towards the nighttime hours. And when it's time for the sunset to come, that is when we need to be extremely cautious of what time or what type of light we are exposed to. So this is when we want to be minimizing the blue light, as blue light raises cortisol and then shuts down melatonin production. And melatonin is our repair hormone. It's our sleep hormone. It's our everything hormone that's got to do with repairing our mitochondria and being actually in good health and allowing us to have these deep sleep. So it's important to make sure that we are minimizing our blue light exposure, even in our skin, which is super important because we have photoreceptors on the skin as well. And so, of course, protecting the eyes is extremely important. We need to wear blue light blocking glasses, especially the red ones that block, 100% or 99% of the blue light. And we need to also be wearing long sleeve clothing if we have to expose ourselves to blue light. And as we already mentioned previously, we want to be optimizing our lighting inside our home so that we don't have to be wearing the glasses even at all. And we don't need to be covering our skin if we don't need to. So if we have red lighting in the house, of course, that's not ideal either, because any kind of light is disrupting melatonin. It disrupts melatonin way less when we have red lighting compared to blue light. So of course, the most ideal is complete darkness, but I understand that people have families, or maybe they can't go to bed exactly when sunset comes, because for example, now as the days are getting shorter here in Cyprus, sun is setting sooner and sooner. I'm not going to go to bed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So of course I'm going to need to have some lighting on in the house. And of course, if I'm going to have lighting, I need to make sure that it's something that's supporting my biology. And then I want to go to bed not too late either. So then I feel that I get enough sleep and I can, set my circadian rhythm correctly, because the circadian rhythm is controlling the hormones and it's allowing our recovery process to take place in the night. And we are also getting rid of many mutated and dead cells that we have, ruined and destroyed throughout our day, through our sleep and through our melatonin. That's one of the jobs of melatonin is to repair the mitochondria and the mitochondrial DNA. And so this is why it's so important to protect ourselves from the blue light in the night, and also the electromagnetic fields, because even though we cannot see electromagnetic fields, they are impacting our melatonin levels and they are putting us in this fight and flight state. So they are disrupting our nervous system, and then we can't get into that nice relaxed state when it's time to go to bed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful explanation. And I think something you touched on that's so important to understand is that melatonin is actually, the type of melatonin is actually made in the morning in AM sunlight, but then it's secreted at nighttime in the absence of light. So, and that needs to actually gradually increase. And so you need to really block out all blue light after sunset, because in nature, there is no blue light at sunset, and there shouldn't be any in your environment either. That's really important.
Yeah,
And
if we want to find the answers of the universe, all we need to do is just look at nature, and we can just see, what we need to be doing. It's not like we need to be reading some scientific papers to prove to me why sunrise and sunset or circadian rhythm is important. If you go outside and you look at animals, for example, they're not dumb to stay out in the strong UV light the entire day either. Like, we are the only species who thinks that we can wear sunscreen and sunglasses and spend 12 hours outside in the sun. I mean, if you look at animals, they are literally in the sun for a period of time, then they go in the shade, and then they go back in the sun again. But they are still exposed to the natural light because they are never in indoor environments. So they are still getting the light through their eyes too, and their skin, even though they're not in direct light. So one thing is that if somebody doesn't want to be in UV light for whatever reason, then even just being under an umbrella and not wearing sunscreens and not wearing clothes and not wearing sunglasses, that's going to allow the natural light to be going, into the eyes and into the body, and that's extremely beneficial.
In the absence of light. So,
exactly.
And that needs to actually gradually increase. And so you need to really block out all blue light after sunset, because in nature, there is no blue light at sunset, and there shouldn't be any in your environment either. That's really important.
Yeah, if we want to find the answers of the universe, all we need to do is just look at nature, and we can just see, what we need to be doing. It's not like we need to be reading some scientific papers to prove to me why sunrise and sunset or circadian rhythm is important. If you go outside and you look at animals, for example, they're not dumb to stay out in the strong UV light the entire day either. Like, we are the only species who thinks that we can wear sunscreen and sunglasses and spend 12 hours outside in the sun. I mean, if you look at animals, they are literally in the sun for a period of time, then they go in the shade, and then they go back in the sun again. But they are still exposed to the natural light because they are never in indoor environments. So they are still getting the light through their eyes too, and their skin, even though they're not in direct light. So one thing is that if somebody doesn't want to be in UV light for whatever reason, then even just being under an umbrella and not wearing sunscreens and not wearing clothes and not wearing sunglasses, that's going to allow the natural light to be going, into the eyes and into the body, and that's extremely beneficial.
That's exactly right. And sunglasses as well. I mean, people always tell me I go out into the sun and then I burn. And it's like, okay, well, let's have a look at how the normal human being lives their life. And it's like, we're inside all day long working a job usually. Or if we're working outside, we probably have sunglasses on. And so we know that we need this light through our eyes. And as you said, the light changes seasonally. So naturally, when I'm moving from winter into summer, like I am right now, the UV is naturally increasing, which when I allow this light to come through my eyes, it's signaling to my body, it's getting warmer now. There's a lot of UV in your environment. You actually need to make melanin, which is our natural tan. It's our natural skin protectant against the sun. And then this melanin naturally increases as this UV is increasing, and then will decrease again as the seasons change. And so that's my body doing exactly what it was designed to do. One, to absorb more light, and two, to reflect any that we don't need, or to refract. And so if I'm wearing sunglasses, even though, let's say I live indoors and one day in the middle of summer, my wife says to me, hey, let's go to the beach, it's really hot today. And so I go to the beach and I have my sunglasses on. And even though my skin is exposed to natural light, my eyes actually isn't, which means that I'm not getting the signal. And I also haven't built my natural melanin up because my body has no idea that it's the middle of summer. It probably actually thinks that it's the middle of winter because I'm inside all day with the aircon on with no light all day long.
All blue light.
I go outside and my body's like, whoa, dude, I didn't know that there was this much UV in my environment. And then I burn because my body doesn't have the tools it needs. And so we really need to understand that our body, and you said this, and it made me so happy to hear someone else say it, our body is never working against us, it's always working for us. We just have to give our body the right tools and the right signaling to do exactly what it was designed to do. When we're disconnecting it from our natural environment, which we have worked to live in unison with and in no way separate from, we start to see all these diseases that we're seeing today. And I think you've covered a lot of those areas quite nicely today, so thank you for that. And your perspective on physical education is just one of a kind, and I can't wait to see your message just reach a ton more people because it's really needed.
Oh, thank you so much for your kind words. And I totally agree with everything that you said. And now it just came back to me what I wanted to tell you earlier about training outside doesn't mean that you have to have small muscles, or in general, you can't build big muscles outside. So if you're exercising, as long as you're training at a high enough intensity and you're pushing yourself to failure, of course you can build muscles outside too. In fact, you can build even better results outside because you are getting the sunlight, you are getting increased nitric oxide, which is giving you an even better pump in your muscles, and you feel that you are getting even more benefit. It's just that you need to condition your body to be able to exercise outside, because as we mentioned, that exercise is a stressor. Sunlight is a stressor. So many things are good kinds of stress that when the stress stops, then the stress goes down in our body. But some other stressors which are non-native and that didn't exist before, our body just doesn't simply understand, and it cannot come so easily back to this homeostatic, I don't really like that word, balance kind of state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not hard to understand. I mean, just from what you've said today, I've come away with so many key aspects of health, especially everyone who watches this should be able to do the same. It's like, okay, so we need morning sunlight to get melatonin. And, everyone cares about their body. They want to look after their body. And if you're into the gym and you want to have big muscles, like these are really aspects of health that you really need to be optimizing so that you can get them. You need melatonin made in the morning, in morning sunlight. So that means probably not being in an indoor gym environment and being out under the sun, so that you can release this melatonin at night that can then repair the muscles and the stress that you've done to your body during the day. Human growth hormone, I think in Australia, I did the math, and I think if I'm not in bed in winter by 8:45, I don't reach the stage of sleep needed at the right time to release human growth hormone, which is also responsible for muscle repair. So that's why staying up can really delay your gym progress as well. And then working out outside, if you don't have a gym that accommodates for a circadian friendly environment. But yeah, such good information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And what you mentioned about the melanin, I actually wanted to ask you a question, that what do you think happens when we go towards winter? Now I'm noticing that my melanin on my skin is starting to go down already because I don't have so much UV light in my environment, even though I spend as much time outdoors as possible. What do you think happens with the melanin? Do you think it goes internally, or does it just rub off the skin? You can give me your perspective on that.
I think it does a little bit of both, but I think the melanin is a signal to our body for high UV. It also disassociates and reforms water molecules. As we know, it's actually, I think, red blood cells, they can disassociate water molecules, or hemoglobin can disassociate water molecules, which then supplies with, no, it doesn't supply with electrons. It's only the reformation that does that. So it is melanin, which is the only molecule. That's why it's called the master molecule, because it can disassociate and reform, which then gives off, every time it does that, with one molecule of water, it gives off 4 free electrons, which we now know that electrons are energy. When we eat food, we're literally just eating for electrons, the path of electron transfer chain. So I feel like in winter, when we are, and this is something that it just blew my mind when I read it, because it means that all the nutritional studies that I have read are just so backwards, because they're all done on dehydrated proteins under UV light, under blue light. It's like our mitochondria doesn't act the same way. The electron transport chain can downregulate and upregulate certain cytochromes depending on the light that it's around, which means our metabolism changes. So if we're not getting as much energy from the disassociation of water through melanin externally, and we're not getting it from the UV light, where are we getting it from? It's like this storage of electrons, as well as the change in metabolism, so that we can utilize this free energy better.
And what about cold exposure? What's your thoughts on cold exposure and melanin, internal melanin production? And because of that, we're able to, create more electrons internally, or gather more electrons, by exposing ourselves to the cold. And it would make sense, right, that if we are going into winter, we would want to be exposed ourselves to cold. So that would be like the substitute to UV.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right. It's all about embracing your environment and trusting that we might not have the studies to prove it yet, but so far what I've learned through all of this is that our environment and nature never gets it wrong. We've evolved to work in perfect harmony with and in no way separate from. And so if we're exposing ourselves to our natural environment, which we no longer are, so in winter, we're keeping ourselves warm, we have a hot chocolate, we have the heaters on all day, and we're not getting cold. And if you're someone that has a haplotype like me that comes from Northern Europe, you really need to be getting cold because that's how your body is designed to function. And so for me, now knowing that I live in Australia as well, I'm not getting cold. My winters are probably warmer than a summer in Wyoming, America, and that's actually fact. So I'm not getting cold at all. But then I know that in winter, to hack my environment for my mitochondrial haplotype, I need to be getting cold. I go for swims on sunrise, in rivers, in lakes, in the ocean, and getting cold in the morning. Because although I'm not 100% sure how that works with energy production, I know that it's going to be beneficial and has failed.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you follow Dr. Sarah Pugh. Is that how?
Interviewing her in a couple of weeks for my podcast.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because she talks about how the cold exposure is increasing the melanin internally, and she knows it quite well, and she knows how to explain the mechanism. So that will be super interesting to hear her perspective. She talks something a little bit about how melanin is produced in the brown fat, and that how the brown fat is more mitochondrial rich in general, and then we're able to, you know, make more energy because of that. Yeah, exactly. So
which is good, which means you're having more structure in those areas and all the follow effects. I was listening to, I think yesterday, her recent YouTube video on cold thermogenesis and melanin. It was very interesting.
I haven't watched that yet, but I'm going to dive into it for sure. One thing I wanted to ask.
No, you go.
Go ahead.
I'll have to pick her brain on my podcast.
Oh, definitely. For sure. Yeah, she's so knowledgeable. She knows so much. I wanted to actually talk about seasonal eating and why it's so important to eat seasonally as well, because that's, you know, telling us about the information of our environment. You know, not only the sun and the ground is important, you know, of telling us what time of year and what our skin and eyes are supposed to do based on the time of year, but also the food has a massive role in the circadian rhythm setting also.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I think that the modern dogma on food is just really wrong. And as you said, it's all about eating locally and seasonally because that's actually conveying information to your body. So if carbohydrates don't grow where you are in winter, it's probably because in winter you're supposed to be using fat metabolism and you're not supposed to be using carbohydrates. And so we know that if you are, say I eat a ton of carbohydrates, let's say in the middle of winter in, I don't know, Alaska or wherever carbohydrates we have them all year round here. I'm so lucky. But so where that enters my mitochondrial electron transport chain, when it moves across, it's actually going to produce a reactive oxygen species, which everyone thinks they're so bad, but they're actually also a signaling molecule for us. So when I'm producing that reactive oxygen species between 1 and 2, it's actually signaling to my body that it's the location and the time of year when it's actually not summer and I shouldn't have carbohydrates in my environment and I shouldn't actually be producing that reactive oxygen species. I should be conserving energy through my peak metabolism of fats in conjunction with my environment. And so it's really important that we do eat locally and seasonally. I feel like my mom always said to me growing up, you know, it's important to eat locally and seasonally. And I was like, whatever, mom, you're just a hippie and don't know anything. But now I'm like learning the science and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom is so right.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so good. It's so good to have that, you know, that elder wisdom, you know, to be passed down to us. It's so important. And even if it doesn't go in the brain straight away, it's planted the seed for later on in life. So that's really, really great. And you know that carbohydrates in general, there is a reason why we don't want to be eating them in the winter, right? Especially if they're not available in our environment. It's because they're loaded with deuterium, aren't they, naturally? So, and deuterium is depleted with UV.
Yeah, because, that's a whole nother story. We can actually do a follow-up live on that if you'd like.
Yeah, it would be cool. I mean, I kind of understand how deuterium works. I know it's a very, very deep rabbit hole, so I need to, you know, research it a bit more so I can fully understand it. But what I do understand is that you shouldn't be eating high deuterium foods in the winter, especially if it's cold and especially if you don't grow those foods in your environment, and how that impacts your mitochondrial function and health in general. And a couple of years ago, I made the mistake of trying to bulk up in the winter because, you know, in the summer, you want to look shredded on the beach, right? And so instead of eating all my carbs in the summer, I ate them all in the winter. And what happened was I was like an inflammation bomb and I felt like crap. And it made me realize, okay, this is totally not worth it. And I haven't bulked since. So now I just focus on eating, seasonally. And especially now that we're heading into winter, I'm going more and more keto. So it's just meats, eggs, some dairy, some fish, all just the high protein, high fat foods, always real food. And, when we talk about food in general, it's just so important that it's something that existed more than 100 years ago. So if it didn't exist more than 100 years ago, it probably shouldn't be eaten.
Exactly, that's all right. I feel like when I learned about deuterium, I was very overwhelmed because I had just wrapped my head around a couple of years ago, circadian biology, what I needed to do to counteract my environment. And then I learned about deuterium and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to buy this deuterium depleted water. I need to go on a deuterium depletion protocol. I need to do all these things. When in reality, if we're living a circadian friendly lifestyle, we're able to handle deuterium just fine. I mean, deuterium wouldn't be in our environment and it wouldn't be a use in our body. Like if it wasn't useful for us, we wouldn't have it. We've evolved to use it in some sort of way. But the problem is when we consume too much deuterium out of season, it's really, well, actually, I take that back. The problem is that our diet right now, it's deuterium heavy through processed foods, through living indoors. We naturally deplete deuterium, like we want deuterium to some degree. We need it to make UV light in our body, and some other things. But we don't want too much of it because it can impair our mitochondrial health. And this is when we start looking at NAD and we start looking at cytochrome ATPase and all these things. How it stops our body from producing metabolic water, breaks our mitochondria, and then we need to have these restorative processes such as apoptosis and autophagy to come in and rescue the situation, except we're not watching the sunrise, we don't have the melatonin to actually run those cells. So it's like this constant build-up of this dead cells and no one's reaching autophagy, right? And so that's one big problem with deuterium, and we naturally can get rid of it. We sweat it out. I think dandruff as well can be quite heavy in deuterium. The skin we flake is like heavy in deuterium. I've had a ton of clients who, when they start the Epipaleo RX diet and they start getting more sun, they get a very bad bout of deuterium. So I haven't actually, of dandruff. So I haven't actually read this anywhere, but I have a sneaky suspicion that is a way our body can get rid of it.
Yeah, I've heard Dr. Jack Cruz talk about it on one of the podcasts. He says that actually when your skin is flaking, you just leave it on and just let it fall off by itself. So he said it's the deuterium leaving your body. I mean, I haven't seen it anywhere either, but I trust his opinion. He's been right about everything else so far. So
Exactly. So if we're living out in the sun and we're getting lots of UV and we're sweating a lot and moving our bodies, like for me in Australia, I have lots of deuterium heavy foods. So fruits heavy in deuterium. Unfortunately, modern day foods such as processed foods are very high in deuterium.
Yes.
Coconut water is also extremely high in deuterium. But if I'm living in the tropics and I'm eating all these deuterium heavy fruits because they grow around me, that's actually okay because I'm depleting the excess through my sweat. But if I'm indulging in all these carbohydrates and I'm living an unhealthy, I'm not circadian friendly lifestyle, this deuterium is going to build up and really manifest as disease in the body.
Yeah, exactly. This is why saunas can be an extremely beneficial tool. Just even if you don't want to exercise, doing sauna is such an incredible tool, especially if it's infrared sauna as well, because of course you're getting the light frequencies there also. So you're generating more water inside of your body as you are depleting the deuterium and sweating. So it's a wonderful tool to use, saunas and sweating from exercise. Any form of sweating is useful.
I love the idea of the sauna too. Infrared saunas have become such a popular thing, and in my opinion, I really think that they should be done only at sunrise or sunset to mimic when the IR is so high in our natural environment. Because I think that I would love to hear your opinion on this, actually. I mean, we kind of have to converse with each other to kind of quote ideas because unfortunately there just isn't enough study done on these topics yet. Hopefully there will be soon. But I feel like just as it's important to get sunrise, to get this UV, to get sunset, the order in which it actually happens is super important, and we know that. But I feel like doing something like red light therapy, let's say at 11 a.m. in the morning, can actually be detrimental because it's like there's a reason we shouldn't be running those processes at that time.
Exactly. We shift our entire circadian clock. That's the issue. That our whole circadian clock gets pushed forward or backwards depending on what we're doing. And then it's the same thing why you wouldn't want to wear the red blue light blocking glasses in the daytime because you don't want to be releasing melatonin. Of course, your skin is also going to tell you about the the time of day. But if you're not outside and you're wearing the red blue light blockers, you're definitely going to be pushing your circadian rhythm forward.
Yeah, that's
for
exactly
sure.
right.
So it's the same thing, and especially because infrared saunas, especially at such a high intensity, it's it's really bombarding us with that red and infrared. So we really want to make sure that it's at the correct time of the day, because the healing and the preparation is either meant to start in the morning or at the sunset time.
Exactly. And we can talk about internal aging. I mean, I also haven't read this anywhere, but for me, it's like if you wake up and you look at your phone, it's going to signal that high blue light is going to signal to our body that yes, it's more than midday than what it is. And then hypothetically, I go outside and I watch the sunrise, and then I come back inside and I look at my phone again, and then I go out and I see UVA, and then I come back and look at my phone again, I go back out to UVA. To me, this tells my body like days within days. So for me, I look at it from a perspective of internal aging and speeding up time, essentially.
Yes,
Because you're
yes.
literally creating light days within days in your physiology.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. And do you want to talk about what's happening with children now, how they are getting, how girls are getting their menstrual cycles way sooner, in their lifetime?
Yeah,
And
I guess you can chat about that for sure.
Yeah, to talk about, in general, because of their tech usage now, because it speeds up time, because the blue light is telling our body, okay, it's this time of the day, and, because our body is feeling under threat and under stress, it wants to reproduce as soon as possible before the organism dies. I feel that's the reason why we are seeing this. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a sneaky suspicion that was it. I also think it's to do with hormonal dysregulation as well, with the blue light and things like this as well, because we know that pregnenolone still syndrome is a thing. So if your cortisol's too high, we want cortisol to be high in the morning, but if it's too high, it actually stops the conversion of pregnenolone to your fertility hormones, and instead decides, Kiera's really stressed right now, something in her environment is not safe. And this isn't just caused by blue light raising our cortisol, it's anything that causes us stress. So anger in the home, trauma, electromagnetic frequencies like you touched on, this is all going to raise our cortisol and cause this absence of fertility hormone. And so it's going to actually convert it to more cortisol, because my body's, as we said, it's always acting in our best interest. And it's like, okay, now's not a good time for Kiera to make a baby. It's a good time for Kiera to actually be on edge and look after herself, that in the future she's still alive and she can make a baby. And so traditionally this would always happen when the only time we actually got this surge of stress was when we were faced with a physical threat. So if we're sleeping, let's say outside, and then there's like this big lion, I guess, in our little camp, and then that's actually my body doing a great thing. It's like, I've secreted all this melatonin, I feel really sleepy, ready to just regenerate, and then I'm faced with a physical threat, so my body's like, okay, I need to raise your cortisol, and that's why it is this cortisol melatonin axis. So every time you're raising this cortisol, you're going to deplete your melatonin, because if you're faced with a physical threat when your body's high in melatonin, that's a bad idea, because you need to have high cortisol. You need to be awake and ready to defend yourself. And that's so great. My body's doing such a great thing for me. But the fact is we have all our basic needs met. We're very fortunate where we can sleep without a worry, especially here in Australia. And the things that are causing this chronic cortisol are artificial signals. And so we're getting this depletion of melatonin, which isn't actually natural. So that's one problem with the fertility. But then the moving forward of the menstrual cycle, I mean, it could be the opposite end of the spectrum, really. Because as you said, our body is always wanting to reproduce. So if you have this natural hormonal imbalance, and then you have a period of life where you are actually healthy enough to conceive, I think your body would push that forward. There's also a few other reasons that I've been looking into, but I just am not knowledgeable enough to explain it on camera.
Yeah, thank you for sharing so much. And for sure. Say again, what was your question?
Can you share your opinion on the topic? I'd love to hear it.
So you mean about the fertility issue?
The moving forward of the menstrual cycle. As young as 6, I think someone just said in the comment. Menstrual cycle girls as young as 6.
Yeah, so that's what I believe as well, is that the body is always trying to, aim for survival. And that's what our biology and physiology is based on. It's based on survival. And the goal of the body is to survive as long as possible until we can reproduce. And so we can, have offspring. So our species survives just like all other animals. And this is why, I believe that this is happening now sooner and sooner in life. And why people are just so addicted to their tech as well is because they're getting these, dopamine hits, and children are just getting completely mismatched signals, and that's totally impacting their physiology. And also in boys as well. I mean, the boys, the issue is that their testosterone is actually tanking. And so that's like a really big issue there, because the girls are getting, earlier periods, and the boys are tanking their testosterone. So it's actually a really big issue. And we're going to be seeing a lot more obesity and diabetes down the road for sure, because of this issue. The imbalance in the hormones.
And I think that we, ideally as women, we're most fertile. I think the data that I read the other day is supposed to be between 14 and 19 years of age. Like, that's how, I guess, our mitochondria are the most healthiest to have more healthy offspring, right? Because we receive our mitochondria directly from our mom. So if our body senses, also our generation is the first generation that's expected to live, not to outlive our parents, so we're actually going to die at a younger rate, apparently, that's what they tell us. But don't have that thought cemented in your head, because or else you're just manifesting that to come true. Have a different outcome for yourself planned. But so if we're not healthy at 15, 16, 17 years old, if I was my body and I wanted to reproduce, I would move my reproductive age earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's exactly what I think. So it's a really big issue, and especially for parents, this message is super important, because it's up to them that they need to control like how their children are using technology, and they shouldn't be given technology until way after, when they're at least 18, because of course the brain is not protected as much either, because the skull and everything, all the organs are developed. Of course, I understand it's hard, to minimize the technology usage, but you need to do as much as you can to protect your child. It's super, super important. It's going to impact their fertility. It's going to impact their mental health. It's going to impact their metabolic health, their appearance as well, whether they're going to be fat or whether they're going to be, in good shape and good athletes later on in life. So it's extremely important to take care of them while they're young, and to give them the best childhood. And to give them the best childhood is actually to give them a natural life, as natural as possible, to live in line with nature's laws.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's one thing to focus on your own health, but we really need to be looking after the next generation, because what use is a good book with no reader? That's the thing that I really love. We really need to be educating the children. And there's actually, Rob's watching this live right now. I know he does a beautiful job at educating his children. They know what a mitochondrial electron transport chain is. They can draw a diagram. It's really beautiful to see.
Beautiful.
It really is confident. And I mean, when we work on our own health too, it allows us to have those hormones needed to want to look after our children, have those feelings of pride, of family security, of wanting to put in the hard work. Because as you said, that comes from a good hormonal balance. And if things like testosterone are tanking, you're not going to have those feelings. So if you're someone that's living in a blue-light environment and your testosterone is tanked, you're not going to want to have that inner drive to do it needed. And it is hard to do these things in today's environment. It's a lot easier to turn on Netflix and forget that all these problems exist. But unfortunately, that's not doing the future generation any good.
Exactly. And it's all about escapism now. Everybody wants to escape to the shortest and most easiest way to get dopamine hit and to try and, feel good. And the screen is able to provide that to us. And because everything is so fast paced online, and all the social media platforms, all the games that kids can play, it's just stimulating the brain so much. So life in general feels so boring when you are not using that, because actually, if you minimize all of that and you just spend time camping, and you go outdoors and you are not exposed to any of those electromagnetic fields or blue lights, you start to realize things around you that you never noticed before. That, wow, like the shape of the leaves, like look at that. Or, you start to notice really strange and really small details. And that's because your brain now is starting to show interest and raising the dopamine levels naturally based on its natural environment. So you are actually becoming excited about life. And that's so important, that if we are bombarding ourselves with technology, we need to, mitigate that, and we need to not bombard ourselves if we actually want to be healthy.
I think that's so true. And I mean, like, everything you've spoken about today, they're really all just external stresses that are really just causing havoc with our dopamine levels, and it's causing our body to actually not produce its own dopamine. So if we're not producing our own dopamine, we have to get that from somewhere. And so if you're a low dopamine individual, you're going to be more easily controlled. You're going to be addicted to things like TikTok, to short form content. And I know it sucks, but I'm okay with saying this because people need to be talking about it. You're going to be addicted to blue light screens. You're going to be addicted to Netflix, to video games, to things that make you feel great emotion, like sad movies on TV. This is how we are beginning to function as individuals. And again, that's our body doing the right thing for us. It wants to make us feel good, to have this dopamine. So don't blame your body. But it actually is about connection back to our natural environment. We know that if we don't get the light frequency right, our light environment right, we actually can't create this dopamine internally. And then from that, you can think of a whole host of conversations that could be had, and things that you can relate, issues in our modern day environment that we can relate low dopamine levels to. I mean, it's just endless. But in children especially, I'm very passionate about children's and women's health, especially in their young teenage years. Being on these devices and being addicted to these dopamine giving apps like TikTok, not only are they ruining your ability to make dopamine, but what the messages that they're conveying and what they're doing to children's attention spans and their general interest in shaping the way that they think. Because we're kind of, well, this is kind of arguable, but for today's sake, let's just say we're born a clean slate and we're actually shaped by our environment. And so if your environment is artificial, that's actually going to change the way that your brain functions. And at such a young age, that is so definite.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what you said about it's so easy to be more controlled in that state. When you live a life in, by nature's laws, you are less likely to be controlled and manipulated psychologically, because all of these apps and social media platforms, internet, and so on, they are all the time harvesting our data, and they are able to push ads to us or about anything, that we are interested in, or that we have clicked on, that we have shown interest, and they're all the time trying to profit from us. And so when we are living life by nature's laws, we are actually able to see their tricks, and we are not so easily manipulated. So this is why it's so important that we have our head screwed on right by being in connection with the ground, because we have to have the ability to discern what is a real tree versus what is a fake tree. Is it the environment outside your phone more important, or with the reality inside your phone more important? And this is the thing that we need to be able to discern the difference. And this is the dangers of virtual reality and, living in some artificial world, because the artificial world can seem so intriguing, so exciting, so it draws you in. Once you can have everything that you desire, you can have the body of your dreams, even though you don't have it physically. You can, you can look like something. It's all about, and it's a lot about ego, and when we are connecting with nature, we lose the ego. We just focus on feeling good, and feeling good is the thing that people need to be focusing on, not so much on how they're looking like.
Exactly, and with the introduction of social media, especially from such a young age, the way it's shaping our brains is to just think that, that's all that matters in life, but it's actually the complete opposite. It matters about who you are, the respect you have, the way you hold yourself, the message that you're conveying. And I think that above all, that is just the most important thing. It's about the legacy that we leave behind. Sorry, someone just commented that my audio is really bad. I think it's actually when you stop talking, the wind where you are kind of picks up more.
Really? No, actually the wind has totally dropped now. There's no wind at all.
Oh, that's so strange. There's no wind here either. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to make sure my mic's actually okay. I don't know. Someone said, how many eggs should I eat in a day? They asked you a question.
So I'm not going to give you advice on how many to eat. It depends on how active you are and how much energy do you actually need in the day. And also, how much your body can tolerate those types of foods. I don't even know if you're allergic to eggs. And so I can tell you what I do. I eat 10 eggs every day, whole eggs with the egg yolk. And I've been doing that now for over 2 years. So it hasn't impacted me at all. And I also eat ground beef every day. And that's something that, you know, it's filled with saturated fats, and what people say that raises your cholesterol. And even if it does raise your cholesterol, is it actually an issue if you don't have, you know, high insulin or inflammatory condition inside of your body, or inflammatory state? So this is all things to consider. But I personally eat 10 eggs every day. My partner Tina, she eats 6 eggs every day. So she's a woman, you know, and she eats 6 whole eggs. So it depends.
Exactly. Well, this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. I'll have to connect with you again. If people want to find you, they can obviously pop over to your Instagram. Is there any other platforms that you're active on?
Well, I can share my website if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can find me at mobility-fitness.com. So that's my website. You can find all my services on there if you want to work with me one-on-one in terms of nutrition, lifestyle optimization, and training. And that can be done anywhere worldwide. And also, I'm also on TikTok, but I don't remember my handle on there. And I'm also on Twitter at Movement Andreas. So that's all my social media platforms.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. You're a wealth of knowledge. I have one more question for you before we finish up today. For anyone who's listened to this, if they want to implement just one thing to better their health right now, what would you suggest?
One thing.
Just one thing.
Okay, this is tough. Okay, the wisest thing to say, I believe, is to minimize the blue light at night. That would be the first step, because if you can do that, you're probably going to sleep earlier, you're probably going to wake up earlier, and you're probably going to see the sunrise. And how do you minimize the blue light? Well, you swap your light bulbs and you wear blue light blocking glasses if you have to look at blue light. So that would turn your Wi-Fi off. Sorry, you said one thing, but I couldn't help myself.
Cancel.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You enjoy your day, and I will chat to you soon.
Thank you so much, Kiera. It was a pleasure meeting you in person after a long time.
Perfect. Bye now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.